good, y'all? Black It Indeed. We are back. Still season 5, episode 9 now. Episode 9, almost at episode 10.
I know, right?
Episode 9. As always, my name is Isaiah.
My name is Luzolo.
This is Black It Indeed. Before we begin, just want to really stress something. Like, I really want to stress this just so y'all understand the importance of what I'm about to say. As we've been releasing, this will be our 9th video by the time y'all see this. We'll have released 9 videos by the time y'all see this. And we want y'all to know, we really want to get y'all's feedback. That's the main thing. We really want to get y'all's feedback. And one thing that we've seen in our past 2 videos, the Rap is Not the Issue video, and then also this past video with our thoughts on the midterm elections and whatnot, we've seen that we've been getting some dislikes. And so with these dislikes, we haven't been getting a lot of likes on these videos. And we know that a lot of y'all are enjoying our content. So we know it's not just like, you know, no one is enjoying this. People just disagreeing with everything. But one thing that we really want to stress is the fact that we want to get our videos out to as many people as possible. We want to get our message out to as many people as possible. And in order to do that, we need more likes, because whenever the dislikes...
And engagement and comments, all of it.
And comments too, because whenever the dislikes
subscriptions, everything.
Whenever the dislikes begin to pile up, that makes YouTube, it messes up the YouTube algorithm, and it makes YouTube less likely to actually recommend our videos to other people. So we just want to make sure that y'all know that. So if y'all could just like this video, that'd be great. That'd be like amazing. If y'all like it. If y'all don't like it, y'all don't like it. We're not gonna force you to like it. But if you really did like the episode, you agree with what we were saying, you enjoyed the content, please just like the episode.
Yeah, I agree. Make sure to comment. We've been seeing a lot of comments recently, which is amazing. I really like reading them. So keep it going. If you like what we're saying, go ahead and comment that. If you don't like or disagree with something, go ahead and comment that, like some people have already been doing. Yep. So yeah, just all the engagement. Like, I like reading the comments. Like, we're gonna take some time to actually like look through them and probably respond to a good number of them. So yeah.
We can also recognize we are busy college students.
Yes, we are.
You know, we're not always right by the computer every 5 seconds.
Yeah.
But yeah, we just wanted to get that out the way. And also, we're going to put a form in the description. It's a new Google form that's anonymous. You can give us feedback. You can tell us topics that you may want us to talk about. That way, we made it anonymous this time, so that way y'all don't have to worry about anything. Y'all don't have to worry about, you know, being found out or, you know, whatever. It's completely anonymous. Y'all just tell us what it is, keep it real with us, keep it straight. That's all we want.
Exactly. And then don't forget, the link to the newsletter is also there if you're not already signed up for our newsletter.
Yes, that as well. So now that we got that out the way, we're going to go ahead and get into our topics today, which are racism starts early, and the impact and the importance of teaching real unwhitewashed American history in its totality in our American education systems. So this time, I normally hand it off to you first, but I want to start this time. Because this topic is really important to me. This is a topic that, you know, I've been thinking about for a while now.
Africana Studies major? Okay.
Yeah, Africana Studies major, and just being black in general, being black in the United States.
That's true, just being black.
Yeah, you know, this is something I really wanted to focus on, because there's been a lot of talk about critical race theory in the news and the media. There's been a lot of talk about the indoctrination of children with critical race theory in elementary school, middle school, and high school. And so I kind of wanted to give my opinion on this, because I think that one thing that a lot of people who are spreading this information that they're overlooking is the fact that racism starts early. So in order to curb racism, because racism is taught, this is learned. You're not just born racist, this is taught over time.
Very true, yeah.
And some students, some kids are being taught racism at a very early age. So
even if it's implicitly, like, it doesn't have to be like, oh, don't go around black people. It can be like little subtle things too.
Exactly. And so just as early as kids are learning racist behaviors or racist words, racist slurs, we can also begin to implement an anti-racist curriculum into schools so that we can try and curb these things and give these students a different sort of perspective on things. And so I wanted to talk about my own personal story. I don't really tell this story a lot. So
he hasn't even said it before this episode, so I'm excited to listen.
Yeah, and I'm gonna give this to y'all straight. There's only one word I'm gonna censor, and that's just the N-word. But the rest of it, I'm gonna give it to y'all straight. The first time that I ever experienced racism, and the reason why this is such an important topic to me, is because I was in elementary school. I'm sure a lot of black people can relate to this, especially the older generation. I'm sure y'all encountered things in elementary school. My generation, we've encountered a lot starting in elementary school. And in my experience, I was in elementary school. I believe I was in 2nd grade, and I'll never forget it. We were in PE. It was all of my best friends at the time. We had a whole little crew. We ran the basketball courts, ran the football fields. I mean, we did everything. And I'll never forget this one day we were walking around the track. And that's kind of what we did normally in PE at that age. We walked around the track and just talked to each other. And there was this white kid who was the same age as us, 2nd grade, same grade. And he started making comments to us. He tried to get under our skin. And at first,
so he knew what he was doing.
He knew what he was doing, and we ignored him. I'll never forget his name. It was Christopher. He was a little redhead kid. and he was making sly comments to us, sly little racial jokes to us. And he's like, "Where's y'all banana? Where's your banana?" Stuff like that. And we kind of we let it be. We're like, whatever. It's all of us and one of him. Like, we could do a lot of damage if we really wanted to. But,
Not the damage.
we were like, we're gonna stay calm. And as we were heading inside, we were heading back into the gym, coming back from the chat, heading inside to the gym. And this is where I believe my first racist encounter, the first time I was ever racially discriminated against, had actually occurred. As we walked into the gym, he looked at all of us that were walking together, and he called us, man, I'll never forget this. He called us boot lip jigaboo porch monkey coons. And as we all looked at each other, we're in second grade, none of us knew what any of that meant. Until he called us the N-word at the end of it, with the hard R. And that we knew, because we've been told about that from our parents. And that's one thing they know as black people, we have this thing called the talk. Now for our white audience, the talk that y'all have is the birds and the bees. Y'all have to talk about, sex, puberty, whatever. As black people, we have the actual talk. And I'm gonna get into this talk. But I wanna say, after we were called all these things, luckily the PE coaches, they heard it. They grabbed him away, took him away, and he got in a lot of trouble, and we were, okay. But we were also mentally and emotionally shaken up. And whenever I got home, I talked to my mom and I told her about everything that happened. And she sat me down and she gave me the talk. She gave me the talk about how in the United States of America, black people, we face a lot of discrimination and we face a lot of racism. And that racism starts early. A black person is not going to tell you that their first racist experience occurred when they were 25, it occurred when they were 30, when they were 35, 40, 50. They're going to tell you it occurred in elementary school, middle school, maybe at the latest high school, some people even later, maybe beginning to get into college. But for the majority of us, it occurs at a very young age. My mom, she gave me this talk. She told me, talk about everything. In the second grade, whenever you're pulled over by the police, whenever you get older, this is how you interact. This is how you act.
Hands on the dashboard, don't talk back.
These are the things that you do. Whenever you're called the N-word, whenever you're called a racially derogatory term, this is how you handle it. Because if you put your hands on this white student or this white kid, you're going to automatically be determined as the aggressor. It doesn't matter what that white student may have said. You're going to be labeled as that angry black man, the angry black woman, and you're going to automatically be the aggressor in the eyes of most people. So this is how you handle being called a racial slur. This is how you handle a racist situation. She gave me this talk, and I'll never forget afterwards, she bought me 2 volumes of a book, and I was looking for this book recently. I just could not remember the name of it. But they were African-American history books, and they were like these thick, like 400-page books, volumes. And it went over African-American history, African-American figures, and also it went along with the talk. How to combat these racist experiences, how to make sure that you as a black person can stay sane as you're enduring these sort of things. And I wanted to share that experience with y'all, because as I read about this critical race theory in the news, as I read about all these people saying you're indoctrinating children, I think back to myself, and I think back to other black kids. And I think about the fact that the only reason why critical race theory is having this huge resurgence, because this has been, a theory for decades now. This isn't just brand new. This has been a theory for decades.
Just didn't have that name.
Exactly. And the reason why it's having this huge resurgence is because it's not because people, adults, the media, politicians are caring about young black kids and their feelings, our feelings. They're caring about the feelings of white students. They've never cared about our feelings. But all of a sudden, whenever we want to talk about introducing history, real non-whitewashed history into curriculums, all of a sudden now it's about white students, but it's never been about us. That's why I wanted to share that story. So I'm gonna transition over to you.
Yeah, no, for sure. You said a lot, so there's a lot that I can respond to. First off, I think critical race theory has been determined to be like a dirty word. I feel like it's the word, how I remember talking in classes before, if you say certain things or certain words, it automatically, somebody just shuts down and they don't listen to anything you say. So, I think that critical race theory is one of the words that if you just say it and you try to defend it, people who don't believe or don't want critical race theory to be implemented will not even hear your valid points. They just won't even, it'll just completely go over their head because they're just so focused on the fact that, that's a dirty word and they just think, oh, no, this is not a good thing that we're supposed to be doing. So I think that it's very sad that it has become a dirty word, because it's not. Like, we were talking about this before the episode. People believe critical race theory is a bunch of different things that it's just not. Like we were mentioning before, like people think it has to do with like sexuality or like gender or like different things. And while there is intersectionality, it doesn't specifically highlight those things. It specifically highlights race and how race is impacted by different things, not all that other stuff. It's
intertwined into law and into our social institutions, our legal institutions, political institutions.
Exactly. So the fact that some people see it as like a dirty word makes me so mad, because it's like not what people just don't even know how to define it. They don't like something and they don't even know what it is, which is upsetting. And then you also, you mentioned the talk. I feel like the talk is a very sad, like it's a very important conversation to have, but I also think it's like a horribly like sad conversation. So I mentioned this before, but like my parents are not African American. My parents are African, like they're from the continent. So I don't think we've ever really had like a talk per se, but they've always like tried to like teach me different ways to like compose myself or conduct myself, just so that when I do like encounter different people, I won't be seen as a certain way. So like even to this day, whenever I like wear something or like this, like I had like this tote bag and my dad's like, no, you cannot wear that. Like that tote bag does not look good. Like you need to like be more presentable. And I'm like, other people don't care. Why do I have to care? So I think it's a very sad talk that a lot of people have had in some shapes or forms, and it's really just about survival, which is very sad. Like the fact that we have to conduct ourselves in certain ways or to do certain things in order to not be targeted or in order to like not be in danger or to not feel like we're in danger. So yeah, that's what I thought about.
Yeah, I think actually I want to ask you, when was your first racist experience?
See, this is a very hard question for you to ask me, because I feel like racism is so intertwined in our society that I've probably had a few racial incidents or some incidents where I was just like, but then I automatically forget it or dismiss it, because it's like me being like, ain't no way that just happened to me, or like just me not fully understanding like, oh, that was racist, if that makes sense. So I couldn't tell you the first time. I really couldn't. But at least recently, or like just being a student at Notre Dame, I can give an example. And it's like subtle. It's not like someone being outward racist, but like being isolated from other people. Like whenever you like enter the room, like no one sitting next to you, but sitting next to like other people, like those little things. Like I'm not saying like, oh my gosh, you're like horrible people for doing that, but it does show racist bias, the fact that you would rather sit next to somebody else, and you are like, so many people are avoiding sitting next to the black kid. Like that's obvious, and that does have like racist sentiment and like underlying things.
Yeah,
I can't identify a specific point though. I really wish I could, but I feel like every time something happens, I just forget it, and I feel like that's probably like me just trying to like shut it down or not want to believe that it's a true thing when it really is.
Yeah, it's a subconscious response.
Exactly.
Response to trauma, trying to just push it away. You saying that, it reminded me of something that Andre Wilson said. He graduated last year.
Oh yeah, he's the one who was telling me about like a moment in the class where he's an engineer.
Exactly
he and everybody. Oh, is that what you're talking about? Okay, you go.
I can see this too, because this is actually at the Literally Black and Indie event.
Oh yeah.
In January, I believe.
Past episode.
Exactly, that Morja and the former Black and Indie crew held. And in that event, he spoke to the fact that he was an engineering student, and there was a time where he sat in a lecture hall, sat in the middle, and every single white student refused to sit next to him. They literally surrounded him, but they would not sit next to him.
Like there was an empty circle like around him.
Exactly, and that's just something like that we can speak to. It's not like she's just saying that to be like, oh yeah, no, this is, no, it's a real thing, and it is very, racial bias. I've had my own experience with that, but I want to get back towards, how racism starts early. One thing that I really want to say is the reason why this topic is so important to me is because I feel like black people, obviously, we're ignored a lot of the time unless we react. But I also believe that black children are heavily ignored. I was reading stories, and I've spoken about this in past episodes. But I've read stories, I've seen videos of black children in elementary school going through racist scenarios, racist situations, and it gets sort of bad to the point where they grab erasers and they start trying to erase the black off of themselves. I've seen stories of young black kids killing themselves, literally kids in elementary school.
Yeah, it's really heartbreaking.
Who don't even really know what life even is yet.
Yeah.
And as much as they don't even know what life is, they don't even know what death is. But one thing that they do is they commit suicide because they're going through so much trauma at such a young age. And your brain's not even developed at that. Your brain doesn't develop until your 20s. and they have no understanding of how to process these sort of things. And so some of you who don't really, who aren't black or who don't really follow our culture, our history, you may be wondering, well, why is this important? The reason why this is important is because of these whole critical race theory talks and indoctrination of children. And this is what I was speaking to earlier, right? No one has cared about black kids. No one has cared about black kids trying to erase their skin. They haven't cared about black kids killing themselves. They haven't cared about black children like my former self, going through race instances of being called the N-word, being called a whole bunch of racial slurs. No one has cared about us. But then all of a sudden, whenever we as people, as a society, want to begin to implement the teaching of the United States history in its totality, we're not trying to sugarcoat slavery. We're not trying to sugarcoat the injustices that black people have been through. We're not trying to sugarcoat anything. We want to teach the actual history. As soon as that is brought up, all of a sudden it's all about, y'all are going to try and teach our white children that they're oppressors, that they are responsible for slavery. In one of my classes, literally just today, just about an hour ago, we had a Michigan State Senator, Mallory McMorrow. She came and she spoke to my class virtually through Zoom. And she talked about an instance where she actually went viral for this, but she talked about an instance where a Republican colleague sent out a fundraising email to all of her colleagues, the entire Michigan State legislature, I suppose, and called Mallory McMorrow a child groomer and an individual, she's a white woman by the way, and an individual who believes that 8-year-olds are responsible for slavery. All because of the fact that she was pushing for anti-racist curriculums and actual history to be taught in American education. That's my issue. Because no one, and I said this in the last video, right? No one is saying that white kids are inherently racist. No one is saying that white kids are responsible for slavery. No one is saying that a 5-year-old white kid that just entered kindergarten is responsible for slavery. No one is saying that. But that's the way that conservative politicians, conservative media has framed this entire thing. Because there's a sense of white guilt, white fragility. And that's there's an author, I wish I remember her name right now, but she wrote an entire book over white fragility. It's the fact that white people are essentially unable to process the past, the history, and because of that, whenever it gets brought up again, they shut it down immediately. They don't want to address it, even though it needs to be addressed. One of the comments I was left in our last video was asking us, why do we, black and Indian, but why do we as black people, as Democrats, as liberals, whatever, why do we make everything about race?
Because everything is about race.
That is the answer. Because
whether you want to believe it or not.
Everything is about race. And he said, by looking at everything through a racial lens, we allow ourselves to be victims. We allow ourselves to be victimized. And one thing, if you ask black persons, we do not like being called victims.
Very true.
Because we know as strong black people, we are not victims. Rather, we are survivors. That is what we are. And one thing that we have to recognize and realize is that as black people, we have been through a lot in history. And everything that we see now, today, all has its traces back in the legacy and the history of slavery. Every sort of form of oppression, discrimination, and racist institutional structures that we face today all has its origins in slavery. This is why actually learning about United States history and black history in its totality is important to American education. This is why. Because people, they say, oh, black people, y'all aren't slaves anymore. In our generation, right, Generation Z, we're not slaves. We've never been enslaved. So how could you still be feeling the effects of slavery? Well, I want to pose this for you. I just want to make one point right here, right? About education. We're on top of education. I want to talk about education. As we all know, education is one of the greatest facets of success. A lot of successful people have gone through education, whether that be formal education or informal education. You can argue, some of the richest people in the world didn't even go to college, but they learned education in another manner to allow them to be successful in some way or another. When I say formal, that could be university. When I say informal, that could be, a trade. That could be learning something from someone else. That is all education. But how can you say that black people are not still suffering from the effects of slavery when from 1619 to 1954, when Brown v. Board was passed, black people were denied an equal education to white students? How can you say that from 1954 to 2022, that can completely override every single racist structure that was in place in regards to education for black people? From 1619 to 1954, you can't argue that. That's not enough time, especially when we realize that reparations have not been made. We have not made any real instances or attempts to actually address these issues. All we do is talk about them. But the people who have power, the people who have money, have not made an actual attempt to actually begin to start working past these issues. So whenever we say these things, we're saying that we're trying to play the victim game. We're saying that we're trying to play the black card.
I hate that comment so much.
Well, why is race such a big thing? All you guys make everything about race, because race plays a role in everything. Almost every single thing you can imagine, race plays a role. And this is why history is so important, because if we understand our history, we would understand why this is the case, and we could then begin to rebuild and move forward.
True. Plus, this is Black at ND. Like, the whole point of this is for us to talk about race. So, yes, we're going to make everything about race because that's the whole point of this. But like you said, like, we're not trying to label ourselves as victims. Whenever a Black person or Black people talks about these issues and talks about the experiences that they're going through, we are standing up for ourselves. We're not saying like, oh, you should pity me. No, we want justice for all the wrongdoings that have been done onto us. Like, that's the whole point of doing this and the whole point of talking about all of this. And going back to critical race theory for a bit, I hate the comment that like, oh, you're trying to make like white students or white people like feel guilty. You're calling them like I hate that argument. And now I want to kind of like shine a light like on the other side of it. So like when you don't teach Black children about race or racism, they don't get the validity of what they're experiencing. Because just because you don't teach about racism doesn't mean that it's not happening. So when you have Black students who are going out and living in the real world and experiencing these different things and being targeted based off of their race, but they're not learning about like why that is in the classroom, or not learning about just the whole context and the history behind that and how it's actually invalid and it's not expressive of like how you actually are in your character, then Black students are hurting. So like the fact that so then this whole argument is only trying to protect white students, not all students. So that's also another problem I have with this argument that like, oh, you're just trying to make them feel guilty. Like, no, but in trying to block this, you're hurting Black people and you're hurting Black children, which is causing all of these traumatic experiences, like Isaiah was saying, and causing people to hurt themselves and causing them to not love themselves, and just causing like a mental like spiral. So it's very important. Like, so I just wanted to spread a light on like the other side of it too. Like it's not, yeah.
Can we just make this clear and just understand the fact that I need this camera on us right now, please. Us, please. I'm gonna wait till we get this camera on us. I don't know what's going on.
There you go.
Thank you. Because this is a very important point. I want to make it clear that critical race theory is not being taught to elementary school students. It's not being taught to middle school students, and it's damn sure not being taught to high school students. You want to know why that's the case? Because critical race theory, it's a law theory. This is something that's taught in college, at the law school, at the graduate
Especially
level.
To that extent, that is very true.
Because it is too complex to actually teach to an 8-year-old who has no concept of hardly what race even is at this point, or who has no real understanding of the reality of the world. It's not being taught. What people are misconstruing and are misunderstanding is that what's being taught in like elementary schools, middle school, and high schools is actual history, and it's an anti-racist curriculum. You know, and this reminds me of, and I was just talking to you earlier about this too, the school district that I went from K through 12 in. This past summer, parents in this school district, they rallied together. White parents in the school district, they rallied together, and they essentially forced the superintendent of the school district to resign, because they said that he, as a white man, was promoting anti-white rhetoric and anti-white curriculum, despite the fact that all he was doing was promoting an anti-racist curriculum, teaching people about the history of this country so that we could move forward and begin to learn from our mistakes so that we don't repeat them in the future. He was forced to resign for that. My school district banned critical race theory from being taught, despite the fact that it wasn't even being taught in the first place. Parents were in uproar whenever my school district wanted to create an anti-racist curriculum in which there was anti-racist vocabulary and the education of things like the Tulsa Race Riots, Black Wall Street, where they wanted to teach about slavery. They wanted to teach about the real nitty-gritty details of slavery. They wanted to teach about the civil rights movement. They wanted to teach the fact that there are white people in some of these pictures that you see of Martin Luther King Jr., of Rosa Parks, of Little Ruby Bridges, and some of these pictures, some of those white people, they're still alive today. The same white people who were spitting on Ruby Bridges, a little girl, the same people who were spitting and throwing stones and rocks at Martin Luther King Jr., they are still alive. And a lot of them,
and they're your grandparents.
some
of you, yeah.
Well, that's not your fault as a little kid. You can't control that as a white kid. You don't choose to be
that's
white.
true.
The same way you don't choose to be black. You don't choose your race. But at least you can recognize that, hey, if my grandparents are one of these people, I don't agree with that, and I will not stand with that. But thank you for letting me know that this may have been my grandparents. You know, and that's all that they're doing. And that's in my school district. They absolutely despise it. They didn't like history being taught. And you know, y'all know I'm from Houston. I know I'm from Texas. I was talking to Luzolo and some of our crew before we started filming this episode about the fact of how our Texas government, our state legislator, passed a lot of legislation to not only ban books by some prominent black authors and authors of LGBTQ plus authors because they were quoted to include critical race theory in their books. One of the books was To Kill a Mockingbird.
Okay, guys, I'm so pissed about this.
Yes.
Like, not that I would understand banning any type of book, really. Well, I guess some books that have like problematic views, but first of all, I don't understand like banning books like about race. But the fact that like out of all the books that are out there, one of them was To Kill a Mockingbird, y'all, that is like blasphemous. Like, you can't do that. Like, that's insanity. I just don't understand why that would be something that you would believe would be okay to do, especially because To Kill a Mockingbird is one of like the most known and one of the most important books ever to discuss race, especially about black people and different experiences that people have had. So I'm very mad that they did that to you guys.
Yeah, you know, like they banned a bunch of books by saying it's critical race theory, when in reality it's not critical race theory. These are books about the experiences that black people have been through. These are experiences about these are books about the lived experiences of black people in the United States. Like, in these books, even if they're fiction, they are based off of real stories. They may be loosely based off of real stories that have happened to black people. But yet, they're like, no, we're not going to have this because they don't want this education to be taught. They don't want, number one, they don't want black kids knowing what happened to their ancestors or what happened to, you know, people of their color. Also, number two, they don't want white people standing up and seeing this oppressive system and be like, oh, well, this is bad. We've just been oppressing them this entire time. That's bad. We should stand against this. They don't want that. And that's what's so problematic for me, is because if we want to move forward as a country, a whole bunch of, you know, conservatives, and even the individual who is in our comment section, he knows who he is. I'm sure he's watching. He said he loves our channel. Thank you for watching. We love your feedback, and we love the fact that you support us. But one of the things that he said whenever he was talking about, you know, why y'all see everything through the lens of race, a lot of conservatives like that, they want us to live in this colorblind world. They want us to live in this world where race doesn't matter, where we can completely move forward. Black people aren't oppressed. Asian people aren't oppressed. They don't face any sort of discrimination.
I love that world. I love that idea, but it's not existent right now.
Except for the fact it's a utopian world. And he said that, you know, we spoke about socialism in the last video. He said that was a utopian view of society.
Yeah, that's
But then
very
also he has this idea of the fact of if we stop looking through race, stop playing the victims, we can move forward. But the truth is that we can't. And I spoke on this in the last episode, because my fear was, and I said this in the last episode, my fear is that if we try to look at our country and at our world through a colorblind lens where we ignore history, we don't want to teach about, you know, the impacts of slavery, the lasting impacts of slavery. We don't want to teach about this stuff. We want to teach that everyone, we're all gray, okay? There are no colors. We don't see color. We're all gray. We are all human beings at the same. We are all members of the human race. That's the only race we are, is the human race. The problem with that is that kids are going to grow up still seeing the lasting impacts of slavery. They're still going to see black people confined to ghettos. They're still going to see black people having historically and statistically, I can't even speak today, statistically lower education levels than other individuals, simply because of the legacy of slavery, the way in which we have been confined to, you know, education that is, I hate using the word, but inferior to white people. The white people have received a much better education throughout time than we have. They've been provided with much more economic opportunities than we have. And whenever we did try to actually build our own economic facilities, our own economic institutions, they were burned down or destroyed, like Black Wall Street. They're going to see all of these things, and they're just going to say, oh, well, black people, they're just lazy. They don't want to do anything. Well, I don't know.
It's so invalidating.
Exactly. And it's like, you're not going to understand why people of color are in the situation that they're in now. You're not going to understand that. You're not going to understand it because you want to look at everything through this sort of colorblind lens, where black people are going to continue to suffer, but we're not going to see them as black. We're just going to see them as just people that are suffering, but we're not going to understand why they're suffering in the first place. That is why history is so important. And that is what I wish people would try to just understand. You know, just literally just try to understand that. I understand as a white person, you can't relate to us. You can't understand our history. You don't understand a single thing that we may be saying right now because it's not a lived experience of yours.
Which might make it harder to believe, but that doesn't mean it's not true or valid.
That is the point right there. That is the exact point, and that's what I wish more people would recognize right there.
You're talking about history and how history is important. I definitely agree because we all know the phrase like history repeats itself. And also, I want to say that unless you acknowledge like what's happening, like you said, like if you don't get down to the foundation, then you won't be able to like actually fix the problems that arise. Like you can't just say, oh, let's just not teach this so it can go away. Like you have to teach this so it can go away. It's not, it's the actual opposite of that. And the argument that like, oh, like this is gonna make white students feel guilty or it's gonna make white people feel uncomfortable. But if you don't do it, then it hurts black students. It makes black people feel uncomfortable. It makes black people.
Even then, I don't mean to cut you off, but even then,
yeah, you're
if
good.
this is taught in the proper way, if an anti-racist curriculum is taught in the proper way, white students should not feel bad.
That's true.
They won't
yeah.
feel bad. They'll understand that this is not them. They are not responsible for slavery. They are not responsible for everything that has happened to black people and other people of color. But rather what they can do is they can learn from that and they can become proponents of change. They can join side by side with us and with other people of color and try to promote change. Not feel guilty, but create change.
I agree, 100%. It's just very important that we do this in order to get better. And like something that a lot of people are saying like, oh, like you're too young for that, but no one's too young to experience it. And then also like people, I feel like so many people, we were talking about this before the show, so many people dismiss young people because they think, oh, you're naive, oh, you're young, you didn't have like life experiences.
Many people who have, you know, have made comments towards us have said that we're naive and that we should be more open-minded or that maybe once we grow older, we'll begin to understand the world a lot better. As if we're not students at University of Notre Dame. This is one of the most
exactly, as if we're not pursuing a college education.
This is one of the most prestigious universities in the country, and we are here. We're not stupid. I'm not saying y'all calling us stupid, but we're not stupid. We are surrounded by professors with PhDs. We're surrounded by some of the brightest minds. We are surrounded by some of the brightest students. We're not naive in the sense that you think that we are. Sure, we're young. Sure, we haven't lived as long as y'all have. Sure,
and we'll learn more, but that doesn't mean what we already know is false.
Exactly. And that's the point.
Yeah, it's just very, this is it's just a complicated thing. Yeah.
Anything else you want to add? Because I could potentially keep going.
I feel like we talked a lot. Sorry, y'all. I have like a little Post-it because I always forget about what to say. So that's what I'm trying to look at and trying to make sure I have everything.
I'm a very spontaneous person. I just speak whatever's on my mind.
Yeah, which is good. But yeah, I think the main point is that the only way to combat racism and all the stuff that's happening is if you teach about it, in my opinion. And like Isaiah was saying, if you teach it in the right way, it shouldn't have any complications to it.
Exactly. So white students will not feel bad. They will not go home crying to their parents saying that my teacher said that I was an enslaver. Like that's not even remotely the case. And a lot of that stuff is so falsified.
Yeah, and if you don't teach it, then you have students going home to their parents saying, my teacher didn't defend me or my teacher didn't say anything about that comment that was made in class, which is also very bad when you don't have, like it's not, you can't just protect only one certain group of people. You gotta do best to accommodate everybody, and if you just don't accommodate any people of color, then that's gonna like raise them in a hostile environment, which is kind of like what we have at Notre Dame sometimes. So yeah, it's the life of living in a predominantly white space.
Yeah, and I want to keep going with this too. I'm sorry, but I just have so much time.
If you have more to say, if you have more to say.
Person. Like things just come to mind. Some just came to my mind. Also, I want to talk about an experience I had my junior year of high school.
Okay.
We were in, I was in AP US History, which if y'all don't know, AP is Advanced Placement. That's like one of the, I think it's the second.
Oh, A push! Yes. I took A push.
I hated that class.
Oh, I loved it. That's when I learned my love for history and government.
The only reason I hated that class is because of the teacher. The teacher taught everything in the complete wrong way of what I believe, of how I believe history should be taught.
Lovely.
And the one thing I wanted to speak about was the fact that, you know, in this class we're supposed to be learning about U.S. history, American history, all of the delicate intricacies of this history. And some of the things that stood out to me, and this is why I say teaching an actual history in its totality is important, is because this teacher that I had, she defended many things that don't need to be defended.
Oh.
She defended slavery. She defended eugenics. And on top of that,
can we hear some of her reasonings? Oh, sorry, on top of that, what?
And then she also defended Christopher Columbus. And
My eyes are big right now. You can't see, but
one of the things that, that she really spoke to in regards to Christopher Columbus, I can speak to the Christopher Columbus part because this is what I remember the most, was we were talking about how, the Europeans, as they brought over Africans, they enslaved Africans over to the New World. She spoke about how one thing that Christopher Columbus did was he spread a lot of diseases. Him and a lot of Europeans, they spread a lot of diseases.
yeah, because they were not accustomed to.
A lot of Africans and Native Americans were not accustomed to these sort of diseases. They didn't have any sort of immunity to them. And she said that, Christopher Columbus, he wasn't a bad man. He discovered, the Americas.
How do you discover something where people already lived?
Exactly.
Let's talk about that. Anyway, keep going.
He's like, he wasn't really a bad man, And we said,
enslaved a bunch of people. Sorry.
You can. I've been talking. I've talked over you a few times, so feel free to talk over me.
No, finish her explanation first.
She said, how can he really be a bad man? We said, well, you as a history teacher should know this. Number one, but
you guys were teaching her.
I guess so at this point, yeah. And one thing that we said is, how can you not be a bad man if you literally kill millions of Native Americans and African people? Like, knowingly. It gets to a point where you're the one spreading diseases. Like, that these people are dying of diseases and you're still spreading them. And how can you not be a bad man when you're an enslaver? You're contributing to bringing Africans over to the Americas as enslaved people.
And her answer?
Well,
uh-oh.
I don't think he's that bad. I think if we look at the contributions that he's made to society as a whole.
What contributions?
And that's what, I'm like, how can you say that as a history teacher, one, but two, those are the sort of people who should not be teaching history.
Facts.
And luckily,
teaching period, honestly.
And luckily, I believe she was fired after that year, or sometime by the time I graduated, I believe she was fired because so many complaints came in about the way she was teaching, But those are the sort of things where history is important, because imagine if there was no pushback on her. Imagine if we were all naive and just thought, oh, well, what she's saying, that's true. If we just took everything to heart, everything she said is true, we would all believe some of these same sort of things that she was teaching. And that's an issue. And that's where I have an issue. That's where I believe, education is actually important. That's where I believe teaching history in its totality, in its actual unwhitewashed manner, and actually focusing on why history is important and the lasting impacts of history, why that's important.
You bring up a good point, and it makes me think about how, like, you mentioned Christopher Columbus, right? And like, we should not have a holiday named after this man. Like, definitely killed a bunch of people. We do not like him. But it also makes me think about just different important members of like philosophies, or like, I don't even know what to call it, like just different scholars throughout history. Because like, if you go back like maybe like 60 years or something, and like continuously go back after that, they're all problematic in some way. Like, literally all of them have held like Aristotle, Socrates, like all of them have had racist sentiments. And it makes me think of like I understand that they're like, the scholars that they have produced are valid and they make sense and they're logical, but then to some extent I'm like, but they were racist.
As we said before, people don't really care about racism like that. They only look at the things that matter to them.
Yes, that's very true. So it makes me just think about like, how am I supposed to know what somebody says is valid if like I can't just like push aside and just be like, oh, but they're like, oh, I believe them, but they're like low-key racist though. But like, no, I can't do that. So it just makes me think about like, what am I supposed to leave based off of a person now? Like, it just makes me think about that. I don't even have the answer for that. Because it's like of course these are like scholars that people have continuously studied, still continue to study, that we learn about like in our philosophy classes, but how am I supposed to just learn from this person that I know is like racist, and like nobody mentions that part of them either? Like, you only learn about these scholarly articles that everybody knows about, but you don't learn about like how they actually were problematic, or actually how they did hold problematic views. So it's like, I just find that so interesting, and I don't really know what to do with that, if I'm going to be honest.
I don't know what to do either. And at Notre Dame we have to, there's a requirement to take at least 2 philosophy courses. In all those courses, you're going to see a bunch of Aristotle, a bunch of Socrates, a bunch of other individuals who also possess racist beliefs in the past.
Or had slaves when they were.
Exactly.
And it's just like you should know better. Like, you're a scholar. Like, how do you not know better? It just confuses me. Like, it must be like so ingrained. Like, I don't understand.
It was ingrained. People of color were looked down at.
Yeah.
We were subhuman. No, we were not human to a lot of.
To begin with, yeah. That's the part I think that makes it valid for them. The fact that like being subhuman and not being human, like that's that's where the validity comes from.
You know, and then I can bet you in their wildest dreams, their wildest imagination, they never imagined that people like us would be ever reading anything that they said, because their words were not made for black eyes.
Or like walking amongst each other, all that other stuff.
You know, their words that
God forbid getting married to each other. Sorry, keep going.
Their words were not made for people of color, but those are the words that we study and that we hold so highly today. And that's not to say that some of their words aren't brilliant, some of their phrases, some of their sentences, some of their philosophies aren't brilliant.
Yeah, exactly.
But at the same time, we also have to recognize that there's a lot of racism behind a lot of these, these words, behind a lot of their sentences. You know, and there's some I wanted to, also talk about too. Unless you have something else you want to add.
I wanted to also add that I think it's important that we talk about how people are problematic. Like, it's okay to like sing people's praises, but when you only sing their praises but like continuously ignore the parts of them that make them problematic, I think that's a problem.
Yeah.
So that's just an example. Like especially something else too I'd love to talk about. You know how when we're younger and we learn about like Thanksgiving, for example, you're like, oh yeah, like Christopher Columbus came, everything was kumbaya, they shared a meal, and then like you add a few years to your age and all of a sudden you like learn about all the horrible things.
Yeah.
Like, why are we teaching incorrect information to our young people? I don't understand that at all. I was talking to somebody else about this, or like I saw a TikTok on it, I forget which one, but what's the point of teaching kids lies when there's really like, that's not what happened? You might as well just postpone that to like, if you think like, oh, it's too much to teach a kid about like slaughtering, which is what happened, then I understand, but don't lie to them about what happened first and then be like, oh wait, actually, like, I don't understand that.
There's meaning behind the lies, because they know that by lying to people, you're not teaching people an actual history. You're not teaching people what actually happened, because if people were to actually learn about what happened to their people, there'd be an uproar, there'd be revolution.
Yeah.
That's one reason why, we had, actually, something I just thought about too. In one of my other classes today, we had Erica Hudgens, who was a former Black Panther member, a leading member. She led the New Haven, Connecticut chapter. She founded it and led it. And she was in our class, and one thing that she was talking about was the assassination of her husband. It was her husband at the time was John Hudgens. He was also a leading member of the Los Angeles Black Panther Party chapter. And he was assassinated in the FBI COINTELPRO operation. The FBI was forging letters between two black organizations, which ended up resulting in them having a shootout.
Oh my God.
And the FBI, in a format essentially, ended up killing her husband, and it was the whole FBI doing. But the reason why I bring this up is because one thing that is very important to talk about, or at least know about, is the Black Panther Party. And with the Black Panther Party, they always wanted to not only take care of their own, they had the free breakfast programs, transportation programs, right, like take care of the black communities whenever the white people wouldn't. But one thing that they also wanted to make sure that the black kids knew is they understood their history. They understood what happened to their ancestors. And the government never liked that, because they recognize that if you teach these individuals their history, they're going to go up in uproar. It's going to go up in flames. They're going to want to overthrow government. They're going to want to get to the bottom of these sort of things. And you don't want that for your society. You don't want that for your democracy. So instantly they start COINTELPRO, and they start taking out these leaders. You see Malcolm X, you see Martin Luther King Jr., you see the Black Panther Party. All people who are trying to spread truth and fight for equality, they're all deemed as terrorists or hate groups, and then they're all taken out. And it's all because they'd rather spread lies than have the United States actually reckon with the fact that it was a very oppressive country, still to this day is, because we haven't really rectified anything.
No.
And they don't want people to really know much about that. They don't want people to do anything about that, because that's how our society, that's how our country operates, is off the exploitation, the oppression of others. And that's the issue.
Yeah. Something to add to that too about like how it still happens today. I'm currently taking international justice right now, so we're learning a lot about treaties and different things like that. The U.S. is like one of less than 10 countries for so many different treaties on civil rights that they have not signed. So this includes like the convention that's on like the discrimination against violence against women. This includes like including the rights of the child. Like we haven't ratified that either. It's including rights based off of race. There's not the university. The U.S. is so conservative when it comes to civil rights, and I don't understand it, because equality is like, we're all equal, we're all human beings, so there should be no reason that someone should have less rights, or just because of certain aspects of their identity, they shouldn't be fully able to have a full life or be discriminated based off of that part of their identity. I don't understand.
Absolutely, and I think that, with this video, we may get some comments of people saying, well, all y'all do is talk. Y'all never give any solutions. So I think in the future episode, we should give solutions to
Solutions. I like that. Well, teaching in school, we did give a solution. We talked about education.
Just more solutions, to other things like, economic inequality, educational inequality, things like that.
I see. So like more concrete solutions? Okay.
Just that people can't get in our heads and say, well, y'all just talk.
That's fair. I think we do at least, well, of course, a lot of this is like talking about like the disadvantages and like the hard things and like the bad things, but I think we do at least sometimes every episode highlight something that's at least trying to show what is needed and why. So like why, so for this episode it'd be like, okay, why is education and learning so important? So I feel like we touched it a little bit, but like we said though, we can get like a little more concrete.
Yeah, absolutely. One last thing I kind of wanted to add, our graphic designer, Tahira, she's in our Black at ND group chat that we have, and she's studying abroad.
She's in London right now, yeah. Girl living it up.
Yep. She'll be here next semester. Maybe come on the show. We'll see. I'm not trying to put no pressure on her. But at least for now, she's our graphic designer. But she was kind of telling us about her experience over there in London and the way in which they teach history. And one thing that she said is that over there in London, they don't really teach, Black history like that. Black English history, or really Black American history, much for that matter.
Yeah.
And that was interesting to me, and I'm not going to speak too much to this. I kind of just bring this up to transition to something else because I'm not in London. I don't know. I've never been in the education system before.
Yeah.
But from what she said, from her experience, that was interesting to me.
Yeah.
Because the English were colonizing nation.
Everywhere, exactly. Wait, that's so true though. They were. So of course they wouldn't want to teach about that.
See, there you go.
Oh, I didn't like that. Just clicked. Sorry.
That was interesting to me. But one thing that Luzolo and I were speaking about this before we started filming, and the reason why I just wanted to bring that up is because we started talking about Europe a little bit, and we started talking about art, and culture.
Yeah.
Culture. And this goes into history as well because there's been a lot of African art and a lot of African history that's been stolen by European nations.
And they're profiting off of it.
They're profiting off it by putting African architecture, African artwork, African artifacts into their European museums and then claiming them as their own, even though they're all stolen.
Yeah.
And that's something that we wanted to talk about as well because that's important to learn in history too for kids. That may be something that gets overlooked. We're talking about this last, so you can say in a sense that we've even overlooked this a little bit.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's something that's important to talk about. This is real history. These are artifacts. This is artwork, drawings. Like literally so much that's just been stolen and that's being used to get people to spend money in these European nations rather than spending money in these African nations. They're stealing artwork and they're claiming it as their own, and no one really bats an eye to it. It's kind of just normal,
Like you said before, no one cares about.
African nations have fought for this
priority.
artwork back. They fought to get this artwork back. They fought to bring more awareness.
I'd like to add, they're always fighting too. They're not just letting it happen. They always fight. They're just always pushed away or like.
Exactly. They're always ignored, rejected, and just pushed away. And that's what I just thought was important. And I urge y'all to look up on that too. That's an important part of history, not even just American history, because obviously we're dealing with the African continent, but also African history. At the end of the day, a lot of us Black people, we're descendants of Africans. So you might as well learn a little bit of history about African history. And I'm an Africana Studies major. People think that Africana Studies is just African American. It's African American and African history. We learn about both. That's something that's really interesting to really talk about.
Yeah.
I think I'm done now. I don't think I have much.
I got something to add though. Yeah. I feel like it's interesting that we mentioned like the UK because I feel like we've not ignored because like obviously we're in the US, so we're talking about the US, but I feel like it opens the door to like, okay, yeah, what is Europe teaching like to their students? And like because like they still colonize by a way, like they still influence and meddle in African affairs. They don't just let them happen. That's not what happens. But I just find it so interesting to like think about now.
I have one answer to that actually.
Oh, you do? You have an answer? Okay.
I said I wasn't going to talk anymore, but then you just said that. In my Intro to African Studies class I did take last semester, one thing that we learned about was the Haitian Revolution.
Yeah.
I had no like real understanding of what it was and what the implications of it were. And
oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. And so one thing that was interesting was this Haitian Revolution obviously was a slave rebellion, the first successful slave rebellion of slaves overthrowing the suppressive slavery based government economic system and whatnot. And one thing I'm sure a lot of y'all probably don't even know is that actually once the Haitians received their freedom,
Yep. This is important, guys. Pay attention.
It is very important. Once they received their freedom, once they not even received, once they fought for their freedom and obtained their freedom, the French government forced the Haitians to pay reparations to them.
And it gets better.
To this day, the Haitians have spent billions in reparations to the French while receiving next to nothing back. Actually, nothing back from the French, really. And that's what interested me. And the reason why I brought this up whenever you said that is because I was reading an article while we were learning about this. I was reading an article because that was my exact question. How do the French teach the Haitian Revolution? Like, what do they teach about that?
Oh, you looked it up.
I looked it up.
Ooh.
And for years, I wish I remember the date. This is like so long ago. But it wasn't until the late 2000s that the French government decided that they could actually teach about the Haitian Revolution in its totality. Before the early 2000s, it was like off limits to teach about it, that you could not teach it in its totality. So French students are growing up not even knowing that their own home country colonized another country. And then once that country fought for their independence and fought for their freedom, they then made them pay reparations to them.
And they still pay those reparations. Like, that's insane. Like, Europe and the West just profits off of everybody else. They loot, they take everything, and then when the people do get their freedom, they still ask them to like pay for like. Oh, sorry. It's so frustrating.
But this is why history is important.
Yeah.
Because everyone looks at Haiti and they say, hey, this is such a poor nation. Look, it's because they're corrupt governments, because they're corrupt regime.
Because France took so much of what they had.
But then you don't realize that. You know, we all think that Haiti is super poor because
doesn't know what it's doing. Yeah.
It's corrupt government and because of all the natural disasters that they face over and over and over again. But imagine if they had all those billions in dollars. Imagine what they could do.
Yeah, they were giving billions.
And that's what's important for us. So I think that's the last.
I think I'm done.
You're done.
This is good. This was long.
Yeah, this is probably our longest episode, I think.
Yeah.
We'll see how it comes out.
There's a lot to talk about when it comes to education.
Yes, a lot, you know, and I feel like we only touched the surface in a sense. But you know, that's going to wrap it up for us. We just want to remind y'all, racism starts early. So
it is learned behavior.
Exactly, and it's important to begin teaching anti-racist behavior, anti-racist actions as soon as you can possibly can for your children. You know, there's books out there that don't indoctrinate your children. They don't make your children feel like they're racist or repressors. Rather, it gets them to understand, you know, history, and they can learn from it. And I just want to say, make sure, you know, if you have the opportunity to do so, teach anti-racist behavior as early as possible, because I can promise you that racist behavior is being taught just as early.
Yeah,
and
like, we're not perfect people. Like, of course, everyone has their problems, but we can't just ignore those problems. So.
Absolutely, you know, and make sure that y'all understand the history of education, you know, and y'all give us feedback on this video. I'm sure we're gonna get some slack.
Like, comment, subscribe.
Yeah, you know, share y'all's opinions. Y'all like the video. Y'all give us some feedback. And share y'all's opinions. And it's gonna wrap it up for us, y'all. So as always, black is beautiful, black is love, and black is excellence. We love y'all, and we out.